Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Spencer Hawks Real Estate Podcast, and hope everybody is having an enjoyable week. So today we're going to talk about first-time home buyers and a guide navigating your path to home ownership. Today I have a great friend with me, Mr. Jose Castro. Jose, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell them where you're at, working, and a little bit about yourself in the industry here.
Yeah, my name's Jose Castro. I'm here working with Armour Realty Group here in Conway. We're a smaller private firm, and I look forward to talking to you guys about some home buying tips.
Well, so what are some benefits of home ownership? Let's kind of flesh that out and talk about it because, frankly, these aren't the easiest of times to get in a home with rising interest rates. Are there benefits that you see to still purchasing and owning a home at these times?
Yeah, there's always for starters, there's always the benefit of, actually owning something instead of renting it. As an owner, you gain equity in the home as you pay it off. So there's always that value associated with ownership. And as many of you know, real estate prices have historically appreciated in the long term. So home ownership is always a great investment, I think, because in the long term you'll have some type of gain. And not to mention the equity that you do build in your home, you can take it out later and use that to fund renovations for the home or even buy other income producing assets.
Yeah, I saw a meme the other day, probably on Instagram, because I'm scrolling through there all the time. And I think, what it said was, you pay rent, you pay 100% interest, and as opposed to owning a home, you're building equity with every payment that you're making on that home. And so, I think that that's definitely one piece of the puzzle there. Something else that I've considered before are like, your mortgage tax deductions, like you can write that off. So it's not only, are you gaining equity in your home, but there are some tax benefits to it too. What are people, from your perspective, and I can go into this a little bit, but like, who's financially ready to buy a home? Like, what does that process look like? What have you seen in your clients?
So someone that's financially ready to buy a home is typically someone that has a good credit score. They don't have a very high debt to income ratio, preferably something under 50%. They have a good steady income source, and it varies. When the time to buy for someone is not the same for everyone, right? So, there's also like personal factors that go into it, what kind of situation you're in. But at the end of the day, if you can afford a monthly mortgage payment and you want to be a homeowner, I think it's the right time to buy for you.
That's great, and I think when you go into that process, there's always going to be good lenders for folks to work with. And I think that that's a benefit. And again, of course, Jose is with Armour Realty. I'm with Coldwell Banker. Each one of us, we have our lenders that we know will be able to help out different people in different settings. They all have products. I had a client a couple weeks ago, and they found their dream home. And then their lender came back to them and said, "I'm sorry, I can't give you financing at this point." And so they're like waving the white flag saying, "I guess we're just not ever supposed to have a home."
Oh, wow.
But it was one lender. And I was like, wait a minute. We have got folks that we know that can help you through this process. So they went to a lender that I sent them to. And we're a few weeks into the contract at this juncture. We've gone through the inspection, waiting on the appraisal. So everything's starting to look up for those folks. And so have you had any experiences about that as far as like financing and working with folks?
Not yet, but that is a good point. One thing we're always supposed to do is suggest that our clients talk to multiple lenders because you never know. One lender might have more favorable rates or terms than another one. So that's a good point there.
So, they can find a lender. There's all sorts of loan types available. I would just encourage anybody listening to this podcast today that don't stop at one lender. Go and vet these folks and see who's going to work best for you and have the best products. In my business, I tell my clients, do not wave the white flag. Home ownership is so great an opportunity. And even if, like Jose was saying, like if today is not the day, it may not be the perfect time for you to buy a house. You know, always have that relationship with these lenders and talk to them. Like what do I need to do with my credit? What can I do with credit repair? What options are out there, if not now, in the future? Let's say that they've found these folks, and sometimes people find their lenders before they find their real estate agent. So, and you and I may have some different thoughts on this, but like yes, obviously they can call you or they can call me. But outside of that, how do you think people need to find their real estate agent? What do they need to be looking for in that whenever, these first time home buyers are going out there and they see all these signs in all the yards? What's the best process of finding a good buyer's agent?
Yeah, so sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming with the large number of agents in the industry. One thing that I personally do when I'm searching for somebody that I want to work with, not necessarily in real estate, could be anything, is I kind of stalk them a bit online. I look at their reviews. I might look at their social media pages. What kind of content are they posting? Do they seem like they're someone that is educated in the subject and could possibly help me out? So that's one thing I highly recommend. Look at reviews. Look at what they're posting on social media, and make your decision off of that. But I think another good way to figure out who's the real deal in the industry is to talk to other people that have worked with them before that you know.
That's wonderful. Yeah, so get references. Whenever you're seeking somebody to work with as a buyer's agent, or really, as Jose was saying, in any industry, get references. I think that's so important. One part for me in finding a good agent is find somebody that you can communicate with and that is ready to communicate. There are some folks out there, and this is maybe even a pet peeve of mine, that like if they're not getting back with you before you proceed with them in a negotiation type situation or some sort of business transaction, be thoughtful in that, like, wait a minute, is this guy even communicating with me on the front end? Because you don't want to be in the middle of this transaction and realize, I have so many questions about this deal right now, but I can't get an answer from my real estate professional. And it may not be anything about his ability to conduct it, but just it's his ability to communicate or their ability to communicate. So, that's one of my pet peeves whenever you're seeking to find the right real estate agent is that communication factor. So we talked about the pre-approval process. We alluded to that whenever we're talking about finding a lender. Jose, what are some of the next steps? Let's say that like we get a pre-approval from a lender. What are we going to have our buyers doing next? What are some of the things that you have your buyers look to do?
Yeah, so after you get pre-approved, that's when the house hunting process begins. So I'll look at the market. I'll look at some houses that fit your criteria, and I'll send them over your way, and you'll let me know if any of those are something you'd be interested in seeing. And then if you see anything as well, you're more than welcome to send those over to me, and we can schedule a showing, and I'll give you guys a tour, and we'll go from there.
So Jose, there's one instance that I can think of off the top of my head where we had these new clients and they told Sochi, my wife and business partner, they said, "Hey, we're looking for a house around $100,000." When you could buy a house for $100,000,
Right.
and they didn't find anything. I mean, she took them to every house in the county for looking for this $100,000 house. After they did that, they're like, "Well, we can go up to like 150,000," and then they incrementally, after looking at all the houses in each category sector. Made their way up to $250,000 and paid cash for it. So, I mean, obviously, if you're looking at a $100,000 house and a $250,000 house, there's probably some difference in those houses.
Absolutely.
How important is transparency on the buyer's part with their agent on the front end so that you can send them the right types of houses?
I mean, it's critical. If there's no transparency, we're just going to be wasting each other's time. I don't want to be spending my time showing you houses that you can't even buy because you're not pre-approved for.
Yes, or on the flip side that they're not going to want because they know in the back of their head that they've got an additional $150,000 to put towards it.
Yeah.
So I mean, and we already talked about this a little bit, but talked about the communication and what to look for in an agent whenever you start working with them. I think trust has to be a primary part of what you're looking for. Can I tell these folks the details of what I have and what I'm able to spend so that they can best help me? So, if you're listening to this again and you're looking for that real estate professional now, find somebody that you can trust and that you can talk to. I am going to tell you, make sure that you have a buyer's agency agreement with them. This may vary across states, but I will tell you this, that if you do not have a buyer's agency agreement, and if they know this, technically they are working for the seller as a sub-agent. If they're with another company, they could be working for the seller directly if it's dual agency, or it could end up being dual agency. But get a buyer's agency to protect your personal information. A lot of people are hesitant to sign those, but they are for your own protection.
Absolutely.
So let's see here. We've hit a few highlights here. Evaluating potential homes. What does that look like? And let's even tie that into negotiation strategies. I mean, like, what are some important negotiation strategies that you look at and that you look towards whenever you're trying to put a house under contract?
Yeah, so some of the major negotiation strategies are associated when it comes to the closing costs. So if I'm a buyer's agent, I might put in the offer that I would like for the seller to pay my client's closing costs, or maybe if not all of them, just a partial amount. And another negotiation strategy comes in with the earnest money deposit. By depositing earnest money, you're showing to the seller that you're a serious buyer and you're willing to put this money on the line. So that always makes it typically makes your offer stronger.
That's good. And one thing too that you could see with closing cost, and folks who are listening to the podcast, I'll bring a lender on here at some point in the near future to talk more about this, because this is not completely my arena, but I do draw up the offers that help folks with this. But on your closing costs, you can actually buy down the points on your interest rate. I know a lot of people are thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to be locked into this home for 25 years, 20 years, however long it goes for at this interest rate. But what you can do is you can buy down those points, and they can put that in the closing cost, which is extremely helpful for some folks. I will say this too, because I heard this the other day, and Jose, I'll let you say something about it if you'd like. But too, a lot of times people, they're worried about an interest rate, but they may only, and this goes back to buying down points, only be in that house like 3 to 5 years. So like if you're thinking, I'm only going to be in this house 3 to 5 years, when you're negotiating, you might not want to buy down your points because you're not going to see the benefit there, because you're not going to be in the house long enough. So that's something to consider too. Any other thoughts on that, or?
No, I think that's a very good point. Definitely think about the time frame that you're going to be in that house. That does affect the negotiation strategy.
Another thing to talk about is the home inspection. So, like, we're under contract, we've got them paying some of our closing costs. Then, per Arkansas contracts, you've got 10 business days to get an inspection. And, folks, I do not encourage anybody to waive inspections. Those inspection periods are so important to you as a buyer. So, you've got 10 business days to do it. The inspection comes back. And of course, I've already established we don't wave white flags. What can the inspection process look like for the buyer after the inspection's done?
Yeah. So ideally, what we want as a buyer's agent is for the inspection report to come back clean, or mostly clean, no major issues. But if the inspection report comes back and there are some major issues with the house, the buyer has the right to ask the seller to fix those things, or ask for some concessions, maybe come down in purchase price. So those are some of the things you might see after the inspection report.
Yeah, I think that it's always important to establish with your buyer, that they will get an inspection, and when that inspection report comes back, we will discuss those items then. And then, too, depending on the type of loan that you're getting, the appraiser may have some repairs for them to do also. And an inspector, like the one that we had, this past week, the inspector said, hey, your loan is FHA, and so the appraiser is probably going to flag a couple of these items on the house. And we were able to note that in a report and just give the agent a heads up saying, hey, we'd like you to fix them now, but if you don't fix them now, the appraiser is probably going to come out and have you fix them anyway, and you delay closing if we waited.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So we go through the inspection, talked about the appraisal. The appraisal is where the bank's going to send out the appraiser, and they may have some issues that need to be fixed. And then, so what happens after that? I mean, you really, after the appraisal, then you've got the closing. So what does a closing day typically look like for a buyer?
So the actual closing day for a buyer, so you're going to, 3 days prior to closing, you should receive a closing disclosure. Then you should receive a document saying how much cash you need to bring to close. So come closing day, you'll bring that in the form of a cashier's check usually, and you'll fill out some paperwork. I don't know. You want to expand on this, sir?
I think, definitely know what you've got to bring in. And unlike one experience I had, the client wanted to bring in cash. Typically, you cannot bring in cash to a closing table. Anything more than $10,000 sets off a lot of red flags. So be prepared to give them a cashier's check. But before all of that, and agents, if you're an agent listening to this, please do a final walkthrough. But I'm going to give my agents another tip. If you're an agent listening to this, do a pre-final walkthrough. Before your clients get there, you need to inspect this house. And I'll go into details in a future podcast here, but I have had one very anticlimactic moment where if I would have done a pre-walkthrough before my clients got there, I could have saved a lot of heartache and tears from a moment of some first-time home buyers. And so learn from me and my mistakes. Don't do that yourself. That said, if you're a home buyer listening to this, do a final walkthrough. Before you sign on the dotted line the day of closing, do a final walkthrough. And then, guys, have a happy closing. Take pictures and enjoy your special day, especially if this is your first home like we're talking about here. It is a big deal to be a homeowner. They call it the American dream, and I don't take those words lightly. So, just celebrate that day. Now, before we close, and I just want to make sure I don't miss it, are there any things like I was just alluding to, like the final walkthrough? Are there any mistakes that you have seen that people need to be watching out for?
Yeah, I think the most major thing is when buyers want to waive the inspection, or maybe they want to do the inspection themselves, and they're not a professional. That's. I mean, you're free to do that, but we will never recommend that. We always recommend that a qualified home inspector come check the house. They do a thorough job and deliver a report. And I think that it's super important because it'll reveal issues that you might not have been aware of or might not be apparent just by looking at it. So always get an inspection.
I think that is great. Getting inspection. One thing that I want to make sure that we touch on too is in the inspection realm, a termite inspection. Make sure you get a termite inspection and you have a termite contract. And then since you're now a new homeowner after you've listened to this, keep your termite contract up with your termite company, especially if you're in the southeastern United States. We do have termites and wood-eating insects here, so keep your termite up because that will affect you in the future if you don't. Guys, we're going to go ahead and come to an end here with this podcast, and I want to thank my friend Jose again. And so, Jose, if you want to give your information just one more time in closing, and then I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Spencer. Once again, my name is Jose Castro. I'm with Armour Realty Group here in Conway. I serve all of Central Arkansas, and my number is 501-499-5023.
All right, everybody. Again, this is the Spencer Hawks podcast, and thank you guys for listening today, and we will talk to you again soon.